Cool. All right. I'll start talking.
You're cooking with gas.
Yay. That's a horrible way to introduce this.
Oh my god.
God damn it, Javin. You're a horrible person.
That was not intentional.
All right. Well, welcome to another episode of Rambling Over a Cactus.
We found another cactus. It's a little classier and more real than the one at my place, but
it's been inspired by a girlfriend of someone's who has uplifted our aesthetics, I guess.
Your house looks like a home.
Huh, I guess that's what she was going for. It really does. It feels like a home now too, which is a benefit.
That is good.
So anyways, we just got back from rock climbing, and we realized as we were rambling on that it'd be a good time for a Rambling Over a Cactus episode.
Might as well take our ramblings to
a fern.
A fern. Two guys outside of one fern.
Yeah.
No, we had gotten into a conversation based on a clip from the movie Jojo Rabbit that Alex had showed me, and we just figured this conversation might be interesting enough to involve some viewers in. But really, he had showed me a clip from the movie, and I haven't seen the whole thing yet. He has, but basically, you're introduced to this character who's one of Hitler's youth at a Hitler youth camp.
Yeah,
and he has these imaginations of Hitler, basically like giving him guidance and doing what you would think Hitler would do. And
it's presented in a way that is of the mindset of what you would anticipate a 10-year-old to think of someone who in their mindset would probably be an authority figure, or at least
probably even a hero.
Yeah, or a hero. That's a perfect way to say it.
It was just interesting because it's that part of the movie is really funny, which is very.
It's hilarious.
It's weird to think, but
I will say this: if you've seen clips of Jojo Rabbit, they definitely show you the comedic part of it. It is actually a serious movie, but the comedic parts are well placed and worth their weight for what it is in the movie. But the movie also depicts some serious elements, which is this Hitler youth who has only grown up knowing Hitler as the good guy, the person who is supposed to lead our country their country to victory. And there's a portion in the movie where they actually, there's grown-ups telling this young 10-year-old boy what a Jew is. And if you watch it as an adult, you kind of think like, well, how would they believe that? Like, why are Nazis so bad? And I think this movie does a really great representation of like people in Germany didn't necessarily think they were bad. If you're a 10-year-old boy and authority figures are telling you, and this is what it is, you're often gonna believe the authority figure.
Absolutely. And not to say that there were plenty of more than enough cognizant Nazis that went out there and willingly did what they did, but there was a reason that there was Hitler's youth.
Yeah.
And it was to instill these beliefs from a young age. And when you look at it in that respect, I don't feel any empathy towards a Nazi, but I feel like they never got a fucking chance.
You get an understanding of how they became what they were.
Yeah, they never had really another option than becoming a Nazi. Yeah. It's like when you join Boy Scouts but instead they're like, hey, you fucking hate these people for these reasons and we're gonna do some bad things.
Yeah, and when you're 10 too, like you don't necessarily have all the wherewithal.
Yeah.
Like when I was 10, my parents told me fairy tales still. You know what I mean? Like, so to tell a fairy tale about a people that you supposedly hate, a 10-year-old's going to eat that up and be like, well, that's reality because adults told me that.
Yeah.
And so that's how I see these people. And
well, there's certain things that you latch onto because, like you had said earlier, like an authoritarian figure or like somebody that you're supposed to look or that you do look up to tells you something. Like a kind of like lighthearted example of this is, before they sold real beer in the gas stations in Colorado, they sold the 3.2 beer.
Yeah.
Which is 3.2% alcohol. I did not know that until I was like probably 24, because my dad, one time we were going home from the grocery store and he was like, oh, I need to stop and get beer. And I was like, why don't you just stop at the gas station? He goes, no, it's 3.2 beer. And I said, what does that mean? And I couldn't have been older than 10. And he was like, it's 3-part water, 2-part beer. And in his head, it was a funny joke.
Yeah.
I went on to believe that for the rest of my fucking life until somebody, I was trying to explain 3.2 beer to someone that wasn't from Colorado while somebody from Colorado was in the room. And I was like, yeah, it's 3-part water, 2-part beer. And this guy goes, are you fucking retarded?
This comes back to the discussion we were having earlier today about the beef and bacon.
Oh my God,
that's how that happens. Is probably because at one point
that kid was told
his dad probably said something stupid, not meaning anything, and he was just like, "Oh, well, that's just what it is. And that's what I'm going to think for the rest of my life until someone corrects me and makes me do push-ups."
That's terrifying to think.
Well, please read for the viewers. Can you tell that story just so they have some context? Because we had a conversation earlier today.
Yeah, when I was in the Army, we had a young man, a private come in, and he said one of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. He was a really small guy, and we were out in the field, and one of the platoon sergeants made him eat like a double handful's worth of bacon. Like probably like I don't know, man, 4 pounds of bacon, and he ate it all. And later we're doing something on the range, and I asked him, I was like, Townsend, how you feeling after all that bacon? And he goes, not really good. I don't usually eat beef. And I was like, man, that's pork, dude. That's from a pig. And he was like, yeah, no, like I don't normally eat beef. And I was like, no, like you understand that like beef, pork, chicken, like you can have other types of meat. And he was like, no, I just thought everything was beef. And a friend of mine just made him do push-ups because we didn't know what else to do with the kid at the time. But it's crazy that like you're right. That's probably the same thing. That kid was hanging out with his dad one day, and it might have even been this, like, that's what terrifies me.
Like, he probably ate, like, some pork or whatever, and then his dad just, like, offhandedly was like, all tastes like beef to me.
Yeah.
And, like, he was like, probably just stuck with them.
Which is terrifying to think that you're a parent, and you can, like, that's the power you have. You have to be cognizant of everything you say, because you don't know, like, you could say something like that, and that dude's like, well, for real, everything's beef.
Well, there's a term, I wish Kelly was here now, because there's a term in psychology, or like an idea in psychology that like, we're all fucked up by our parents.
Yeah.
It's just to what degree, and are you able to cope and figure it out? Because your parents will fuck you up, period.
Of course. I mean,
everybody's parents kind of fuck them up in some way, shape, or form.
There's no way you can have a parent that's completely aware of the impact they're having on their child at every time, because you're still a person. Like you're trying to figure out like what to do with this little person, and you're still growing yourself, especially like young parents too. Fucking
dude, I think that's where I got like the whole idea of like loving suck. So my dad was like ex-military and also played football for Notre Dame. And so like when I was training for anything, he was like, if it doesn't suck, you're not trying hard enough kind of idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I think like that actually carried over into my adult life, where I'm like, to some extent it's a good thing, because it basically means like if you're not failing, you're not growing. But you can take that to a very unhealthy place where you're like, no, if it doesn't suck, it means I'm horrible and I'm not doing enough. So you're like constantly looking for the suck. And then all of a sudden you're just living in suck, and you're like, well, this is a good thing. And it's not.
I think, I don't know if we really touched on this yesterday or not, but like, so like you said, like, you know, just you've trained for something so hard, and you know what it really feels like to like work and grind for it. And like you get kind of, you know, kind of lost in that, and it becomes your mindset of it sucking, and you can absolutely perpetuate that into everything else, because when you become laser focused on one thing,
for sure,
and you're just grinding away at it, you don't give a fuck about anything else. And if you do give it attention, you're like, fuck you, I'm get back on this. For sure.
But I think that's also kind of comes back to this movie where, I know you haven't seen the whole movie, but there's a point where there are people hanging in the town square in Berlin. I'm assuming it's Berlin. They don't explicitly say that. And the boy's mother is just standing there, and the kid's like, "What did they do, Mom?" And she was like, "Not enough." And then she just kind of walks away. And what you learn through the movie is, even though she was, to some extent, trying to help her son just kind of fit in. So she was like, yeah, honey, go be part of the Hitler Youth, like, do this. Secretly, she was actually, like, trying to help the Jewish population. And so when she saw those characters, and what you come to realize later in the movie is she was a Jewish sympathizer. And so when she said not enough, it was her saying, like, it sucks they got caught. They were killed for this, for helping Jews. Secretly, she was a Jew sympathizer. So when she said not enough, it was like they died, so they didn't do enough yet. And that's really what, it's crazy too, because like that mother in the movie has two different mindsets. She's like trying to do the best for her child in the situation, but then she's also morally trying to do what she thinks is the best as her own individual person.
Yeah.
Like, that's a crazy thing to think of. Because, you don't typically see, like left-wing parents raising their children to be right-wing if the child wants to be right-wing.
Yeah.
You know what? Like, you don't see that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I guess in a way, like, she thinks she's just being a good parent by, like, letting him be happy.
Yeah.
But that's crazy that she still has the ability to see
she's looking at both sides. She's like, what's best for my child and what's best for humanity, or what I believe in.
Yeah.
Per se.
That's a crazy thing to think about, though.
Because back
Jewish
then,
sympathizer, and you know what they're doing, and you're like, well, maybe they, and that's a thing too. Like, maybe a lot of German people didn't know to the extent at first of what. I mean, I could absolutely believe that.
Because by the time they got to Berlin, which is when this movie is really set in, they probably did.
Yeah.
But I could definitely understand, like, early on, in the very beginning of it, where they're just like...
Or it was just a political movement. It wasn't even like...
Yeah. They weren't like... Because they didn't come out and be like,
yeah, they weren't
torturing Jews. And
we hate Jews. Like, that's it. That's what we stand for. They didn't... that's not how Hitler came to power.
No, really. It was more like, the Jews are the problem.
But they kept that as like an undertone at first.
Yeah. And they were like, you guys need to be back to work, blah, blah, blah. The Third Reich were superior. So we're just going to ship the Jews out of our land because we just don't want them here.
Yeah.
They weren't like, we're going to kill millions of people. I hope you're okay with that.
Yeah.
That conversation, I don't think happened. I think it was a slow accumulation of like small little subtle stories that you heard.
And then boom.
And then you started to realize it. But at that point too, it's like, if you sympathize with it, well, they'll just hang me.
Yeah. So
you kind of were forced into like, well, I need to hold the party line, be a good Nazi.
Well, I
because
I had actually forgotten about this, but a good family friend of ours growing up, their neighbor was actually one of Hitler's youth. She was like taken out of Germany when she was like 7 years old or something. So she was at the tail end of the war, sort of, or of Hitler's, rule. But I talked to her a couple times when I was a teenager, as much as I could about what it was like being Hitler's youth. And she had said that, it took her, through her childhood and even into parts of adulthood to get rid of all the things that she had believed. Because she was like,
right.
It wasn't like she's like, I knew when I came to America, like they had won the war and this and that and so other, but it wasn't like, it wasn't immediately like, you guys are heroes, oh, thank you for saving me.
Yeah, no,
she's a 7-year-old
she
girl.
Was probably like thinking,
you guys just fucked my country up, dude.
Yeah, you fucked my country up. Okay, America won. And like, let's just, on the other side, let's just say she believed that America was a good place to be.
Yeah.
In her mind, she was probably still like, well, you guys you guys just let Jews hang around and they're still like mind reading devil people, but you just let them hang out.
Yeah.
Like when you're that young and all the stories you've been told, like to a 7-year-old, I can imagine like they're just like, oh, well, you just let these people that we've hated like hang out with you and whatever.
Yeah, yeah, she said that like it, you know, it was, I don't know, I guess she kind of made it seem like the members of Hitler's Youth that were brought over to America were like not like severely Americanized, but they were quickly, they were like, yes, to be like, look, like what you guys were going to grow up to be is fucking awful.
Yeah. Like,
and you can't, like, we have saved you. Like, whatever way you want to look at this, like, you're not going to be war criminals.
Yeah.
And so, like, she said that part, like, was definitely ingrained. But I can only imagine that when you're 7 years old, now you have the two most conflicting ideologies in the world you could have at the time.
The only
both
way you
wedged
could have
into your
made
brain.
The only way you could have made that worse is if you added Scientology on top of being a Nazi. That is the only way that could have been worse.
Scientology.
And if you're a member of the Scientology church, I have no problem with you. If that's what you believe, good for you.
But if you're a Scientologist Nazi, go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
I think anybody can agree with that.
Yeah.
Oh.
No, but I think that it's weird too, because it also seems very cultish. You know what I mean? Like you get programmed.
Oh yeah.
And I think the harsher part or the harder part is if you're getting programmed at an early age, that's when your synapses are developing, the ones that you will carry with you for life. And if not life, you have to do a lot of work to overcome those synapse connections, because that's when your brain is developing the fastest and the strongest connections. So it's almost like I can understand it, because I've known a couple people that grew up in cults.
Have you really?
Yeah. And it's definitely tough for them, because especially when they leave and if their parents stay, that's even harder. And then they come to reality or the modern world, and they're like, there's just so many little things that you don't think about that they have to like truly dissect and understand, because that is almost 180 degrees of how they grew up. So the idea of like police is like a foreign concept to them. They're 25 years old, and like pulling over for a police officer is like, what is this? What does that even mean? And then and then you have to think like, well, we grew up like knowing how to properly interact with a police officer. Meanwhile, they've never interacted with a police officer ever, and this is their first time, and they're just freaking the fuck out. And of course, a police officer who rolls up on a 25-year-old who is freaking out is going to be very suspicious. And so their interaction with that police officer is probably going to be drastically different than anybody else's, but because they're so hyped up, they're probably going to get even in a heightened interaction with the police officer, because the police officer realizes they're on edge. So the police officer is going to be on edge. So that interaction is going to be completely different than us, whoop, whoop, speeding ticket. All right. Yeah, I was speeding. Sorry, officer. Here's my ticket. Like they're like,
the police are, in other parts of the world are so vastly more aggressive and not
they
as
can, for sure. They're almost military.
Yeah. To the point where like you see the police and you're like, oh fuck, like I'm gonna die. You know what I mean? And I mean there's a lot of speculation about
even
that
in America,
here too.
yeah.
But that's not what I'm getting at. Is like I've never even thought of like how if I was in a different country, right, and I'm used to the American custom of I'm getting pulled over. Sorry, I'm not from here. And then the next thing I know, there's some dude beating my ass on the side of the road, like, and he has all the authority to do so. Yeah. I'm just like, what the fuck?
Well, the other thing too is like you got to remember, and like what I was getting to was that like these are traditions or customs. I guess you'd call them customs. They're not in the normal sense of customs, but like we've been trained as youth, like how do you respond to quote unquote authority figures in this country? And so you know how to act appropriately. Like I'm not gonna make a fucking joke that I would make to you to a police officer that just pulled me over. Like I'm just not gonna do that. And so like if you've never experienced anything like that, and all you know is that a police officer can put you in jail, and the first time you get lit up, you're like, I'm going to jail for life. Because you don't know. Yeah. No one's explained to you these rules of our
you're
society.
Now like you're not realizing that it's a 5-minute situation.
Yeah.
But in your mind, you're like, this is it. This is the rest of my life. Like I am now a prisoner.
Yeah.
I forfeit all my, I get it, that, oh my God.
Yeah, and so like what I've learned just from these people that have been in these situations is like there's a drastic learning curve. And in some ways, I actually had this really weird dream. I think it's appropriate to share. So I had a dream where we're interacting with all these people, right? And there's like 22-year-old whatever, and throughout the dream we're interacting with her, but she's just slightly off. And come to find out towards the end of the dream, she's like, well, I'm only 9 days old. Or like, it was basically like a weird biology, like she was like a clone who just grew up and then like, she was born 9 days ago, but she just grew into this 22-year-old person. But she only has the experience basically of 9 days in adult life, but she's able to talk and think. So she's a little bit more like grown up, but at the same time, she's like, I'm only 9 days old. And you're like, oh, that completely makes sense why you have no idea what any of this stuff means. And I almost think that that's kind of what it would be like if you came from a situation where you were like indoctrinated very young and that's all you ever knew. And then you just get thrown into this completely other world and you're expected to know all of it. You know what I mean? Like to my mind, like that dream is relevant because it's like, well, you take a 22-year-old who's been in a cult all their life, and then you throw them into the real world, and 9 days later, this is who they are. They don't know anything, but they can think and talk. They just don't understand anything that's going on, which I think would be a terrifying situation to be in.
First off, before I explain anything, that kind of fucked me up in the head a little bit. But no, I like that's such a good analogy.
Movie, though, right?
That's what I was thinking of. There's an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie from the early 2000s about cloning. I can't remember what it's called, but I used to watch it with my dad all the time, and that's what I was thinking of the whole time. But like, yeah, holy shit, that is. Yeah, because your customs, your values, what you've been raised to believe, that's everything. That's your reality. And when you're just, like thrust into something different and, you
expected to interact
and
like everybody else.
That's got to be the craziest thing. It's like, it's not,
well,
it's not that the ideas are pushed on you, but like you're being shown that like, hey, this is where you used to live and that's what they believed over there. Eat shit.
Yeah.
This is what we believe here. And this is how it's got to work.
Well,
that's crazy.
You know what's funny though too is like there's a movie I can't remember, but basically like let's just say go back to my example. You're a 22-year-old girl and you dress appropriately for the United States, right? And you're just out in the city. Everyone is going to expect you to follow those customs, our customs. If you show up in a loincloth and like maybe you have moccasins on, and I'm not trying to be like racist or stereotypical, I'm just saying like there's like something about like your wardrobe and your presentation to people where like I feel like if you looked like an indigenous person, there may be more leeway with that. Like the society around you may would be look at you a little bit more with kindness or not so harshly, or
I don't know if it'd almost be kindness, but I'm
understanding that you don't understand the customs.
I'm once again thinking of like movies from my childhood, but the what is it? Jungle to Jungle or whatever, where the kid, he's raised in the fucking whatever island, and then Tim Allen brings him back to New York City. And you know, there's always there's a lot of movies like that, but there's always like that cut scene of him like walking around New York City in a loincloth.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, whoa. You know, like,
yeah.
And there's never any harshness. It's not like, hey, fuck you, caveman boy. It's
like, oh,
he doesn't get it.
Yeah,
like,
he's different, but we understand that he's different. Whereas I feel like, again, in my dream, it was just a 22-year-old girl that looks like a 22-year-old.
Yeah.
And so when they don't follow the values, you're like, fuck you. Like, you haven't learned shit. You're a piece, whatever. Yeah. And so to some extent, that's where I'm getting back to, like, when you come out of a cult, like, you typically don't look any different because, like, okay, maybe you had like a robe that you would wear,
but you probably
in the cult, but you just went to the next store when you got out and you bought some clothes. So you look to everybody else, you look like a normal human being who should know how to interact with society.
Well, it's like what kind of, like, you know, with the whole image thing. Like, say you're in a Starbucks, right, and the person in front of you is dressed, you know, nothing irregular, but they cannot figure out how to order a coffee. Like they can't spit the words out. You're like, what the fuck? If in that same situation, I saw somebody in like some kind of crazy, like archaic drab, like, you know, a loincloth or like just like a Greek robe or whatever, and they didn't know how to order a coffee, first off, I'd be like, okay, that's fucking weird. But second off, my mind would definitely be like, maybe they don't get it. Yeah. You know, like, you know, or I've smoked too much weed.
Yeah, one or the two. But I think like it's kind of funny too, because that also harkens back to like, you know, we live in Colorado and we can definitely pick out the people not from here.
Oh yeah, for certain.
Because you're like, I don't know if you guys know, Colorado really isn't that cold and it doesn't snow that much unless you live in the mountains.
Yeah.
So like, you'll see people here in October who have like their puffy Patagonia jacket on, snow pants, and like fucking Ugg boots. And you're like, bitch, I'm wearing shorts and flip flops right now. It's 80 degrees outside. What is wrong with you?
I will tell you, you can tell a true native of Colorado is like, now granted, I fucking love Patagonia.
Be careful what you say because I'm not a native.
I know. But I fucking love Patagonia, REI, all the expensive brands I will pay that money for because I know that it's good equipment.
It's
good fucking equipment. Thing. But when I don't need to use it, it's in my crawl space in a camping bag. Yeah. And like a true Colorado native will be walking through like fucking 6-8 inches of snow in a fucking shitty pair of Converse and a hoodie. Because it's, you know that like,
you know, if you overdress. Well, you also know that the first 2 hours of the morning, yeah, it's going to be cold. But I also know that come 10 o'clock, I'm going to be baking.
I don't need all these layers. I don't need all, yeah. It's almost funny too, like the people that aren't from here always have like the flashiest gear, you know?
It's funny, like they have this expectation of what Colorado is. And it's so weird because I feel like the expectation is really like it's built on the ski towns. People think Colorado is what those ski towns are, which are very insulated bubbles. Yeah. Most of Colorado is not like that. In fact, half of Colorado is Kansas. Yeah. Let's just be real.
Yeah, if you go into the lower southwest region of Colorado, it's if New Mexico and Kansas could kind of like commingle in that land, that's what it is.
Yeah, like more than half of our state is not what people think it is. Yeah. Which is crazy.
So stay out. Don't move here. Stop moving here.
Fuck you.
I'm just kidding. You're welcome.
I was here before it was cool.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's what I'm saying. You were pre-legal weed, so I have no problem with you.
I think I was pre-legal recreation. But I definitely was not pre-legal.
Well, yeah, I mean pre-medical. Medical was like, back in like
yeah. I remember the first day, like not the first day, but like maybe a week after I moved here, I was driving down I-25 in the Springs, and me and my ex, we just looked over and there was this guy in an S10 in the passenger seat as a pot plant, like buckled up, like secured. And I just looked over and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. We're in Colorado. Like it's legal here if you have the right
things,
yeah. And it was just like, it was kind of mind-blowing because I came from Ohio where it's like, no. But this guy's just like driving down the highway with like It's right here.
And that's the weird thing about Colorado is like, yes, the stereotypes do exist where you definitely will see like people driving down the road with you see people in their pickup beds just pot plants out there, and that's cool. But I think that there's also like this weird, people think that's like just this weed utopia where like you can just do whatever you want.
It
like
really
we
is.
still have laws and shit. And like my biggest thing is I am happy that, you know, we were one of the like forerunning states to like legalize this shit. But if you're moving here purely for that, fuck you. Like, be proactive in your state and make a change like Coloradans did. You know, because it's the fact that you fucking, if you live in, you know, Idaho and it fucking sucks, well, you know, campaign a little bit, go to this. You know, I guess it's, you know, when I think of like the misconception of how people view Colorado, like I think of people like my sister who has never a day in her life smoked weed. She's lived here her entire life, and like, it's just funny how because I remember there was a big debate, like, if we legalize it, everybody's going to do it.
Yeah.
And like the legality of it changed, and it wasn't like people were like, oh my God, like, let's do this now. And that's
Other than Boulder.
Yeah.
Other than Boulder.
And then you did have that crazy argument too, where people were like, well, why don't we legalize meth? Like, fucking, have you seen somebody smoke meth?
There is like have you ever watched Cornucopia, or what's his name? There's a Vice show.
Oh, yeah, with what's his name, and he does.
It's basically a drug cornucopia show.
Yeah,
and he talks about it, and he basically, you know, one of his points throughout all of the episodes is drugs in and of themselves are not deadly or harmful. It's when people overdo it that it becomes a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's a perfect example of it. It's like, you know, yeah, you could legalize meth, and there have been, you know, cities that have like completely gotten rid of like any punishment for drugs. Typically, you actually see lower crime rates, and actually, don't quote me on this, but I believe it's true. So therefore, it's true, because fake news. Fuck you. But in all reality, if I'm remembering this correctly, there's actually less episodes of addiction where they've completely like decriminalized all drugs.
Yeah.
It's not that people don't get hooked on it and that people don't have problems, but the problems seem to be less when you just decriminalize all of it.
Well, you know, I think that the fact that we criminalize drug use is crazy.
Because, you know what's even crazier to me is I was watching an episode of, I don't remember what the show it was, but it's basically like, this guy had relatively a small amount of like methamphetamine or crack or something like that, where it wasn't even enough to be distribution charge.
Yeah. And
he got 25 to life. Meanwhile, there's a guy over here who hit a bicyclist with his car. Now, granted, unintentionally, but he killed a person. And he gets out in, 10 years?
Yeah. Criminalizing drug use is just fucking, it's fucking retarded, because that's when you get like what we have with overpopulated prisons, things like that, because you're making people into criminals. Yeah. Because if you arrest a kid, you know.
I wish Peaches was here, because he knows the criminal justice name for this. It's like, it's basically the concept is, if you tell someone they're a criminal enough times,
they will become a criminal.
Yeah, they're just like, well, fuck it. If you think I'm a criminal, I'm just going to act like a criminal. There's no...
Yeah, you've already labeled me this way, so why the fuck shouldn't I act this way?
Maybe it's called labeling theory.
Maybe.
Could be. I don't know. You guys do the research. You have Google.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so do we, but you don't want to see us on our phones.
We're not going to research stuff in front of you.
But no, when you, like... The way I look at it is, you know, you take a situation where you arrest somebody, they have drugs on them, and that's the only thing you've got them for. Present them with rehabilitation, things like that. Because if they were arrested for drugs, it's probably because they were acting crazy as hell. And when you're doing that on drugs, that means you need help.
But so when you have crack on you, like, technically, if a cop pulls you over and just like swabs your crack pipe, even if you weren't doing
anything, don't you hate it when that happens?
So much. But like, you know, even if you were like pulled over just because like your tail light was out, then they find that. I'm in no way justifying smoking crack. Horrible idea. But I'm just saying, like, the fact that, you know, maybe you're just driving home, whatever, and then because of a cotton swab and a glass pipe.
Yeah, now you have crack on you, and now you're going to jail for a long time. And like that's the part of it that's fucked up. Like if you can clearly catch somebody like possession with intent to sell, fuck them, put them in jail. You're a piece of shit. But yeah, like just criminalizing people that
are the end users,
just the user. Like, and you don't, you know, like that's what's crazy. You shouldn't be penalized. Like if you want to fucking do drugs, okay, you know, it
sucks.
It's a terrible thing, but like you can't criminalize that. There's nothing criminal about wanting to escape reality. Like you're creating your own problem. That's why I mean the war on drugs is just the fucking dumbest shit that's ever happened. You've created your own enemy.
And I think this comes back to, and I was just talking about this with you earlier, is I was watching the show The Trade on Netflix or Hulu, I can't remember. We'll put a link in the description for this. But I actually went to school with I went to school with the son of one of the judges in the show. And when I saw him interacting with a heroin addict, he actually had a very personable approach to how he was talking to this person. And it was not like, you're a horrible person for doing heroin, like I'm gonna put you in jail forever. No, he had a very humanistic approach, which I think, and I believe, is a great way to treat this. It wasn't like, you did heroin, I'm sending you away for life. It was like, you did heroin, how are we going to get you better? What can you tell me that you're going to do?
What's going to stop you from yourself coming back to this fucking courtroom?
Yeah. And basically, and treating them like a person. Like, I realize you fucked up. I realize that you may have made bad decisions in your life. And I want to hear from you that you want to get better. And I want to hear from you what you're going to do to get better. Yeah. Because I don't want to see you back in here. And that was very, like, it was touching to me basically because, one, I knew the judge, but two, just like, as a person who has had people die from heroin too, it was also very touching to see somebody treat a heroin addict who was brought up on charges like a person, and not like a degenerate and a waste of human flesh. Yeah, that's when you attach these criminal labels to, you know, people that have legitimate drug problems, that's where you fuck it up. Because, you know, like you said, like they deserve to be treated like people still. You know, they're struggling through something. And, you know, and I'm not going to justify, like, you know, if you get hooked, you get hooked, and I'm sorry, and that sucks. But, you know, for some reason we have this view as a country, or I think it's even bigger than that, but we see drug addicts as less than us, and that's not true. You don't lose your worth as a person because you become addicted to drugs. Please tell me that quote that you were telling me earlier when we were walking back from breakfast about you're only so many days away from being homeless, but never.
Yeah, you're only. I don't remember who told me this or where I heard it. I have no idea, but it was you're always only a few months away from being homeless, but rarely are you 3 months away from being a billionaire.
Yeah,
you know, like 3 bad months, you're fucking living on the streets. You never know what could happen, and you know
to look down on people like that who have had those bad months, like.
They were, and it's crazy to say normal or regular.
It's not to say that everybody in those situations is like that, but I would say like that's a situation that does happen, and it's regular enough to, at least when you see a homeless person, to try and understand that they probably I guarantee you, nobody ever like grows up going, I want to be a drug addict.
Yeah, I want to be I want to be less than self-sufficient. Like that's not that. I don't give a fuck who you are. That's not embedded in you.
That's just that's actually weirdly against human nature.
Yeah, and it's but and what I'm starting to realize is like when you really are like you see drug addicts or homeless people and you're like, man, fuck that. You're kind of judging somebody's breaking point in a way. Like you don't know what somebody can take or what they have taken to where like they're finally like, fuck this.
I mean, like for a perfect example is like you and me, I'm assuming we didn't grow up being molested by our parents.
No.
And like, how do you, when you have people doing that to you that you're supposed to trust, and then maybe let's just say they're not even barely, they're just barely sufficient enough to like maybe have a house.
Yeah.
And that's the environment you grew up in. How are you supposed to interpret that, understand it, and then move on from 18 years old and be a self-sufficient adult when
you're just supposed
you've never learned any of that and you've only ever been treated like shit?
Yeah, you're supposed to leave the only environment you've known, which is chaos. And then you're just supposed to be like, all right, I got a job and I'm a productive member of society now.
Yeah.
Like, no, you've spent all of your formative years in nonsense.
Yeah.
And, it's, I don't know. And I mean, another huge thing too is like most of the, like homeless people and drug addicts have severe mental health issues that are never addressed, and that's
right.
And that's another thing too. When you start to criminalize things like drug use, you start to not necessarily, but you start to embed the ideas of criminalizing mental health disorders.
Yeah.
And that's where the real misconnect comes in is we're not looking at people with mental health issues as people. We're looking at them as people with issues. And I think more people should be empathetic of that like if you're not in that situation, it's probably because and not to say that like mental fortitude and your own self-strength doesn't pull you to a certain extent, but you at one point or another you were probably fortunate enough to have even just a small group of people that were like an actual caring network for you.
Yeah.
Some people never fucking have that.
Exactly. And it's sad. It's sad. I wish we treated more people like, oh God, this goes back to our conversation that we had with Jace on our last podcast. But in terms of judging people who just for whatever reason, you don't like them.
Yeah.
Just because of their personality, but at the same time, like, who's to say that person didn't come up in that environment? And in a weird way, like, maybe I don't like you, but maybe you're still somewhat better than what you could have been. And that's a hard, like,
that's a hard rationale.
Yeah, and to be in that mindset to look at everybody that way all the time.
Well, and that could take an even more, a different turn is like, another thing we talked about on the podcast, but the classmate I had that aggravated me and the one that you had, you're doing the same thing. You're if you look at it, more subjectively, you're building your bias on this person. And I have no fucking idea what this dude was raised amongst. I have no idea. He's weird for a reason. He's cringeworthy for a reason.
That's one thing I did learn from like my forensic studies is like no behavior pattern you see in people is for no reason.
Yeah.
There is always a reason someone behaves X, Y, Z. Period. Always. What it is, you kind of have to figure out and decipher, but human beings do not just, unless you are truly just like out of your mind and legitimately just need to be instituted. And in that case, that's a sad tragedy. But I would say most functional people who are just like out there, there's a reason that they are out there.
Yeah. It's developed behavior. And I don't know, I guess that's just a different way of thinking about that, like if, I guess if you look at it, like everybody I think can empathize with everybody knows that person that is so, when they open their mouth, you just
You have empathy for what they're saying.
Yes, because they're embarrassing themselves and you want them to stop.
Yeah.
But I guess I've never thought about it from the perspective of, like Alex said, that's not for no reason. It's not like they woke up one day and they were like, man, I can't wait to go to class and just annoy the dog shit out of Javin by
maybe
being a person.
I'm sure there could be some people like that, but at the same time, even if that's the case, there's a reason that they're thinking that way.
And and I guess that's just maybe a little empathy needed on my part. This kid.
The fact that you get cringeworthy over it is, I think, a great example of empathy enough. And I hate to get on like this leftist wing, like we need to be accepting and inclusive, and because
that's a whole nother rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, in short, I believe we do need to treat people as people, but there's a point where you can accept somebody and still not like them, and not liking them is not a crime. Period. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Your feelings, sorry, in the grand scheme of things, they don't matter. And you should just, if somebody doesn't like you or they do hurt your feelings, and I mean hurt your feelings, I don't mean hurt you, do physical harm to you, that's entirely different. But if somebody just hurts your feelings, move the fuck on.
Yeah.
Like like you gotta keep moving.
It's life. Like life is not easy. Life is not a bunch of rainbows and bubbles. Like,
no,
it's just not.
Like
it never has been. And to think that creating an environment where that's the case is actually a benefit to society, I would argue is actually a hindrance to society. Because without challenge, without adversity, you never grow, really. If you just want to sit in your bubble and think that I'm totally okay all the time, that doesn't promote any growth in you as a person in any way.
No, it's like to even think that you could make a utopia, if you will, out of people is just fucking nuts, because anybody that believes in that has never had a bad roommate.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you just don't fucking get along with people, and that's okay. That's absolutely fine. You just don't interact with those people or whatever.
I think that's the biggest problem, where like people want to think that if I don't like you, then it has something to do with like your sexual orientation or your heritage or whatever. Like sometimes you legitimately just don't like somebody, and it has nothing to do with any of that, and that's okay. You don't have to interact with that, but to cry like
if you're rude about, or if you're
there
just
are
an
definitely
asshole.
issues. Yeah, there are definitely issues where people like bring it over the top, and they're like,
but if you
blah,
just
blah, blah.
if you can realize that you just don't like somebody, okay.
Yeah, we don't have to get all. We don't have to like each other.
No.
We have to get along.
You have to get along, but getting along and liking each other,
yeah, they're completely different.
Like, and that's the thing too. Have you never fucking played a sport, like a team sport, where you fucking don't like this person, but
damn it. Well, maybe
we have to make it work.
Yeah, maybe they're a great third baseman. You're like, you know what? Like, I don't like you, but you're good at what you do.
So,
but just personality wise, I don't like you.
Or like, and even in your professional life, I don't fucking like you, but you're good at what you do. Do. You know, I feel like that those simple. A lot of people that have ideologies of like a perfect and inclusive and loving culture, I think, or just I really think they're sheltered people, because I think if you experience life and you just experience like how humanity is, you're not gonna have those ideologies to an extent. Yeah. But it's just like,
but it's also, and this almost comes back to like the whole idea of like being in a cult. And I'm not saying this is necessarily a cult, but I'm saying if you live in small town America and you're not exposed to different cultures, elements, whatever, when you see that, to you that's like completely off the wall, and like you're different, we don't like that. And it's definitely a form, it can definitely take on the form of racism, But I think underlying that is more of we just don't understand different.
No, all right. So when I was in North Carolina, I had a friend, and I'm not going to name any names, but this is a perfect example of what you're talking about.
You know who he's talking about.
You do. But no, I was in the Army with this guy, and he was from him and his friend that they always hung out together. I'm not going to name names, but they were from the actual Florida Georgia line, not the gay ass country band, but they were from like that real part of the country. And that real part of the country is very fucking rural. Like, yeah. So anyway, so I go over to a barbecue at this guy's house, and it's, you know, BYOB, and so I bring my 6-pack IPA.
Bring your own bomb?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
And so I bring my 6-pack IPA, and, you know, my friend, he's like, hey man, what the fuck is this Whole Foods ass beer you're bringing into my house? Yada yada. And I'm like, man, it's an IPA, try one. And he takes it and goes, it tastes like grass, bro. And he looks at me and he goes, Barry, where the fuck are you from, man? And I was like, I'm from Colorado. And I'm not making this rest of the part of the conversation up. My man goes, that's the only state outside of the Southern I'd ever fucking worry about visiting. And I was like, you mean to tell me that outside of the South you don't want to go see anything besides Colorado? And he was like, fuck yeah. And I was like, why? And he was like, because my daddy told me that everybody north of the Mason-Dixon line's a fucking faggot. And he believed it.
I know.
He believed it. And I laughed, you know, because I thought he was joking. I was like, that's a funny well-timed joke. Good for you, sir. No. And I was like, God damn. And the other friend who was raised there, he was blessed enough to have left that part of the country and be raised partially in California. So he got the later part of his life was like, oh, culture and people and things. Just different.
Those are two different extremes.
Yeah. And so he definitely balanced out really in the middle. And he was telling me, he was like, no, he's like, literally, it's like when you grow up down there, he's like, that's the kind of ideas you believe. Like raise hell, praise Dale, dude. Like, that's all it is. You know what I mean? Well, we had kind of hit on, you know, like how certain attributes, certain characteristics get like generalized into being like a hipster. Yeah. Or that one terminology.
You know what's crazy is like I remember back when I was a kid, I was in college, but we had a friend, and I won't go into the long story, but he passed away. He was shot by police, and you know, I understand why that happened, but at the same time, like he was a good kid, and we had a memorial ride for him at the skate park. And I remember there was I didn't find out about this till like a day later, but we were all there to just memorialize him in a free skate ride, whatever. Just be like, he wasn't a bad dude. He made a bad decision that night, kind of thing. And this mom was there, and she made a comment to one of my friend's moms, was like, it basically saying like, we're all dirt bags, worthless pieces of shit. And she kind of pointed at me, apparently. It was like, you see that kid right there? Well, he has a 4.0 GPA and he's going to med school. Like, do you really, like, basically pointing out the fact that like, just because you ride a bike or ride a skateboard or whatever, like and the fact that they're here celebrating a friend. Yeah. Like, this was someone who was close to them, and they're mourning his loss. And no one was there saying like what he did was right, but we're mourning his loss. And for you to come up and be like, you're all degenerates. Yeah. Fuck all of you. Like,
well, and that's the thing. It's a lack of perspective. She didn't know your friend. She didn't know the times that you had with him. She didn't know that like there was a side of him that existed beyond this, you know, this story that had been reported. Yeah. And to see, you know, that's crazy that, you know, you would see people clearly like, you know, having a vigil or, you know, mourning over someone, and to have an opinion over that is just fucking crazy. Like, right. How are you going to tell somebody how to feel about someone that's died? Like, you're out of your fucking mind. But, you know, that's a lot of like, I don't know, dude, priorities are so fucked up in that sense of like,
well, you know, what's weird like, though too is like, because the reason she was there was because her kid wanted to go to the skate park. And so I get like there's a motherly instinct to like protect your child.
Mm-hmm.
And so in her mind, I think she was looking at the group of people at the skate park as like, well, you're degenerates and I don't want my child being associated with you. But she did not take the time to realize like, if you asked any one of us, every one of us would have been like, what he did was a bad idea. But that does not detract from the fact that we knew him for years.
And
we love the guy, and he made a bad mistake that sadly ended his life. We don't support what he did, but dude, we miss him. And he was not a bad person outside of this incident, you know?
Yeah, it's just it's people like to get bent out of shape about stuff they just fucking don't understand. Like, I feel like maybe that's not the way.
Well, I think it's like they read it in the paper and they just figure that what's in the paper is the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
That's now my opinion.
That is the whole thing. That's the whole story. That's the whole person in and of themselves. Is like this 500-word essay that some reporter who didn't know the person wrote.
But and I mean, then again, that, you know, a lot of that goes on the reporter themselves, because it's not up to the reader to do all the credible research.
You know, and I'll be honest, I read the report in the paper and none of it was unfactual. I don't think it painted him necessarily as a bad person. It really was like, these were the events that occurred and this is how it happened and that's it. But the problem is that that's all anyone saw of him.
Well, that's partially the trouble with reporting in a way, is, you know, you're only given, you know, 500 words, 1,000 words, whatever. Yeah. And when you take a situation like what you have with your friend, who, you know, you're dealing with a whole person's life that was taken over one situation, to be able to encompass anything,
I mean, to
even
explain,
close to that in 1,000 words is...
Yeah, no, to explain why he was even in that situation. I mean, like, I don't even know how to put it into words, because
Exactly.
You know, as a friend, you kind of knew what was going on in the background and how things were playing out. Like, I don't know how many words it would take to explain the background situation that led to why he was there. And again, not to say that he was justified or right for doing what he did, but at the same time, knowing the background story, I'm like, I understand how someone could be pushed to that situation where he did what he did. And so, like, there's, you know, I think it read as like, oh, he just did this because he's a bad person. And like, no, you don't understand the background story of this. Was he didn't just go out to do this. He was pushed to a situation that led him to do this.
Yeah.
And that's a completely different story, but no one's going to report on that. One, because it would just take up too many words and too much of a newspaper, because it'd basically be a novel.
You know, I mean, you're telling someone's life story, essentially.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, you know, but on that same token, talking about like how it is partially, you know, a journalistic responsibility to report, you know, as much truth as you can in the space that you're given. Also, as a reader or as someone receiving any news, if it is enough to impact you to where you feel a certain way about it, then you should do the fucking research about it too.
But that's the other thing too, is like, how would you? Because the only way you could do that research is like,
I guess.
Okay, I'm gonna hit up all of these guys' friends who have never been contacted by a reporter, and I'm gonna ask all 150 of these kids
maybe that's
what their story was.
Yeah,
like, you know, like,
and I guess that's I mean, that's a little. That would be a little much.
And but I mean, like, because I remember we went to his so the next day, I believe, I don't know, it was so long ago, I don't remember the total timeline, but I remember being in his backyard, and there was 150 of us kids with his parents having a bonfire memorial for him. You know, like, we were there to celebrate his life, and as tragically as it ended, like, we were there with his parents. And I really feel like the only way, like, And this I don't think there's any blame on the reporter, because the only way you would find this story is you'd have to talk to each one of these 150 kids to get their side of the story, and then to make a coherent version of what his side of the story was. But we want to demonize people, and so he did something illegal. So why would you invest in telling the humane side of the story? You know?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that it does make sense. That's what was that? What were we talking about yesterday? The unfortunate necessities. You know, is I guess that's another one of them. You know, like
it's
you can never.
Sadly, it's easier to do this than it is to do this, and just.
And I guess when you're reporting events
in a way so that society can keep moving forward, you can't necessarily take the time to analyze everything. Because, you know...
Well, yeah, because if you had a newspaper, for example, that analyzed everything, you'd get a fucking Webster's dictionary dropped off on your driveway every day.
Yeah. Yeah, and like physically just the time commitment. Like, let's just say you had all the information as a reporter. Just to physically type all of that out, you could not do in a week.
No, and
for every story that you have, you physically, like, there's...
You'd have to be hiring reporters every other week because they'd be killing themselves. Because they'd just be...
Yeah, it would be insane. But I think, it's weird, too, because, like, just getting back to, like, the hipster thing, you know, you kind of get judged for certain characteristics, and sometimes those characteristics, like, you express one, but it's so not a representation of you just happen to express this one characteristic, and then they go, well, you expressed that characteristic, so now you're a hipster.
So now you are that characteristic.
Yeah, and you're like, well, I just, like, in terms of a graph, I just went boop.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, no, you just saw the boop, and now you think that I'm this or that or whatever.
You've generalized a whole person off of one.
Yeah.
One thing, or a couple of things, I guess.
One or a couple. Like, basically, it's just like, again, it comes back to what we were talking about before. It's just easier for the mind to comprehend things and make snap decisions, because it takes effort for your mind to, like, sit down and think about those things. And you just don't have, like, I don't care how left-wing you are and how inclusive you want to be, you cannot sit down and think about that every time you interact with a person and have a reasonable interaction with somebody.
And you can't tell me that if that's your base belief for how the world should work, you want to tell me you're different than me as to how you're predisposed to judge somebody? Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, no, that actually bothers me. Like, I definitely do not agree with the hard right in any way, but I feel like the hard left are just as bad as the hard right, because basically they're doing exactly what the hard right is doing.
They're pushing. It's so crazy. You're almost pushing the same agenda, just at two. And you're talking the far reaches of both. Like, it's insane. It's because they're both so inclusive of themselves.
Yeah.
That they're both just
not
like
open
begging.
They're not open to understanding. Like, not
they're only begging
like
for their own understanding. Understand me. Understand this, and nothing else.
Yeah, and if you're not part of that, you're horrible.
Yeah, how
you're
dare
a horrible person for being a normal person.
Yeah. How dare you? How dare your mind deviate from the way that my mind works? Like, it.
That is the.
It makes me want to just fucking.
That's gonna be. I hate to say it, but like that divide, because you know what's crazy about it is, like, the divide from the hard right and hard left. The population of it is very small. But the problem is you have people that lean slightly right, slightly left. Most of us, I would say, we're in the middle. We really are. Like, yeah, you may be a little bit left or right, but most of us are in the middle. And you have these two basically egocentric groups that are like, come here. This is the right place to be. This is the right place.
Yeah.
And then
everything over there is wrong. Everything.
Yeah, and then they produce their own indoctrination process, And then now you have American Nazis on the left and the right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, you have, it's just so, you know, people love ideologies, and people love being attached.
Thinking.
They like being attached to an ideal that is bigger than themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what happens with, you know, like with politics in America, is it's almost like a vindicating thing to some people to be like, well, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat. Like, it goes back into what we were talking about yesterday. Like, it's a part of your identity.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why it's so catastrophic that if somebody says like, well, you know, I don't agree with that idea that you have, it's no longer an idea, it's part of your fucking identity. And so now it's a personal attack. Now you're saying that not only myself, but all my friends and all my family and everybody else that believes like this, like me, is wrong. And how fucking dare you?
Well, you know what's crazy is like I would consider myself like on the right hand side politically, but with some leftist ideas. And I watched a documentary about Antifa, anti-fascists. And now, granted, there was a march and a conference for hard right wingers. I don't agree with their politics, but in the documentary, they were presented as, we're going to follow the rules. We're not going to do anything to like try and invoke a problem. And these left-wing activists came out and counter-protested everything. And I was like, to some extent, I understand like what your issues are, but I felt like they were the protagonist of this event, to the point where, okay, you basically pushed the right wingers so far that they definitely reacted. And then you were like, see how evil they are? They reacted like,
yeah, you provoked them.
You provoked the fuck out of them. So
and then,
like, how does, like, honestly, and the way you provoked them was like worse than what they were even trying to do, because they were trying to follow the, you know, the responsible, ethical way to do what they wanted to do. Like, I don't agree with it, but you know, at least they went through the right channels and were acting accordingly.
Yeah.
And then you sit there and you basically come up and like, you know, sucker punch a right winger, and and then they pull a gun on you, and you're like, see how evil they are? Like, dude, you just punched a dude in the face who had a gun on him.
Yeah.
What did you think was going to happen?
Yeah, and that's, you know, I think that's, you know, we love, like, culturally, we love those videos of like, oh, conservative gets triggered, liberal gets triggered, like that kind of stuff. But a lot of that shit is, like you said, it's provoked, and they don't show you
the provocation.
Yeah, all the bantering and all the shit that led up to it, and it's on both sides.
Yeah, no, it's 100% on both sides.
And it's just like, you know,
that's where I'm
and
like,
that's where we
the hard left and the hard right. I'm like, you guys are at war, but the way you're presenting it, it makes it feel like the United States is at war.
When most
of us pretty much hate both sides of you, because you guys are horrible people, I think, in general.
And I think that is something that really is happening in the United States, is a lot of people are, you know, just smart enough to decipher and say like, no, this is horseshit. Like, your guys' constant battle for, you know, partisanship or whatever you want to call it.
They're arguing over morality, and the funny thing is, neither side is acting moral.
No,
at all.
Not at all. And that's like that's what's funny to me, is like they both stick to their moral high grounds. Like, you look at the Republicans, and they have attached to Christianity, and if you look at the left, they've attached to just humanitarianism in general, and anything they can fucking put their hands in.
We're not saying that all of you are that way. We're generalizing for
just like we were talking about earlier.
We are only generalizing for a conversational
See purpose. How you don't have to get mad about that?
Yeah.
And how you can understand that this is part of a conversation, and that there are a lot of other facets that are not being examined right now.
Exactly.
But, you know, like you see of the right that attaches to the, you know, Christianity, and then you have the left that is humanitarianism in all aspects. And they, like you said, they try and play themselves as these morally, you know, wonderful groups and this and that. like, and you just see the hypocrisy is so blatant on both sides. Like, if you want to say that the Republican Party is rooted in Christianity, then it shouldn't be in fucking politics, because everything politics stands for, current politics, is so far removed from the values of Christianity that you have to be fucking kidding me if you think that they can even, they could even sit at the same table. And then, you know, the left's like, their humanitarian causes are always for, like, you know, I call it like flash photography. Like, we're going to care about this really hard for a couple seconds so that, like, people remember that we cared about this. And then it's on to the next one.
So the left and the right are so far removed, hypocrisy, where the left is saying we're moral, like, basically the two moral high grounds are arguing over each other, which is, in my own mind, is just ridiculous. Because one, if you truly believe in the values of Christianity, you would be able to allow the left to believe their beliefs and act how they do. And again, on the left-hand side, if you truly believe in the values that you're preaching, you would also be able to allow the right to act how they are acting.
Both groups, from what I can see, I feel like both groups just want total inclusiveness. And that's it. Yeah. Like, they don't want the other to exist, you know, and that should be a scary thought for any American.
It's a very scary place right now.
Because you're realizing that you're only faced with two different powers that be. You have the left, you have the right. God bless his soul, Gary Johnson. He'll keep running every year, but he's probably never going to win.
Well, you know what's scarier, though, is, like, before it was like Democrats or Republican, one lent one way, the other lent the other way. But now it's like candidates are, like, rallying behind almost the extreme causes. And that's scary, because if they're representing the extremist views of either side, you're like, you're not representing the actual average person.
Yeah. Well, and it's like, when you're, you know, when the far right or the far left does something, I don't see why they don't, like, both parties just disown that behavior altogether. Right. You know, like, if I was say like a centrally left or centrally right, you know, right. Like
I think that's actually where most people fall. They're like, I'm a little right or I'm a little left. Like, I believe in a lot of this and like, some of that.
Why can't the politicians should be able to fall into that same realm? And when they see crazy shit like that, they should say, no, like, that's excluded from our ideals or our beliefs, blah, blah. But funny. Then you always see them. Even if it's really bad, they justify it to some degree because it's...
You know what I think it is? Is like, so if you look at the bell curve, right, which is America, and I think most of us land in the middle, what's sad is that us probably more sane people... That's right, I'm saying it. We're definitely more sane if you fall in the middle. We are probably, sadly, the least likely to vote.
Yeah.
Because the extremist ones, those are the people that are like, I really care about this. Those are the people that are going to come out to vote. So you almost pander to those two extremes.
Of course,
to the detriment of actual society, because the middle of this argument where most of us probably land, like, sadly, I think a lot of us believe that, like, it doesn't matter who we vote for, because it doesn't matter. But what's sad about that is that the extremists take advantage of that. And so now you have politicians pandering to the extremists to some degree.
Well, it's because in order to pander to the truly, like, central people, like the truly middle ground, open-minded people, that would take intelligent conversation, right? And that is not what is marketed to people during election season.
Yeah, because
here's this ad. They did some bad shit. You should not like them.
Because you can't
vote for me.
You can't pander to it without, like you said, an intelligent conversation, which would take maybe an hour. Like you know, these candidates get asked a question that's extremely deep, and if you wanted a true answer from any one of them, it wouldn't even be a full answer, but just to get like a generalized answer would take an hour per person. And that's not like a true, like accurate summation of what the answer should be. And then, okay, you have 16 of them. Like, you have to narrow it down to these sound bites. And, you know, like...
You know, isn't it crazy that we... Go ahead.
In grad school, if my teacher asked me a question that was deep, even in grad school as a student who knows nothing and is only learning, would still expected to be able to answer the question thoughtfully, probably 3 to 5 minutes, and I would have to cite references. In grad school, like master's degree. Our politicians should be PhD level or higher, which means their answers should be even more in depth. Like if I'm a dumbass grad student, because let's be honest, and you know, if you're a grad student, you're still a dumbass. You know that you don't know anything.
I'm undergrad, so I'm retarded.
Yeah, you're stupid. You're just ridiculous. Like, I can't even believe I'm talking to you right now. You're a fucking piece of shit. But the point is, like, you know, like, I was just a master's student, and like my responses are supposed to be higher than these politicians. And if you're running the country, like I would view that as like you need to at least be at PhD level of understanding. Now, I granted that you are also responsible for a large volume of information, so you may not be coherent in every element of it. But I still feel like you should have people on your team that are, and be able to understand your thought process and produce an argument that is at least that level.
Well, if you think about the debate platform that we have now, that we still use that's how we choose our candidates.
Second string debate team.
So much better.
Yeah.
But no, like think about that. We like you said, you know, the Republican, the Democratic debates, like you have these incredibly deep questions with so many variable answers. Right. And then they're like, all right, Joe Biden, you have a minute and a half. Like, you know, and I guess I don't get the platform of it because those debates are catered to viewers. Right. That's not what they should be. If you want to watch a real fucking debate, and don't get me wrong, I know that a real structured debate has time limits and stipulations and things like that, but it's not like that. It's not made for the viewer. If you want to really get to know these candidates, then put a real debate on television, and those that want to watch it will fucking watch the debate.
Well, even aside from that, like I actually remember when I was in grad school, I wrote a paper that basically, to my professor's dismay, said that the social sciences were worthless. And not in the sense that they don't add anything to society, but in the sense that to answer these very extremely complex variable questions, you would have to put in so much research and so much money into research for these questions that it would actually be, it just financially would not be viable. And I think that's kind of where we're at, where it's like you're trying to explain socioeconomical interactions that are so wildly variable, and you're trying to be like, no, this is what it is. And like, we're not even at a level sociologically, like in the journalism of social sciences, to even answer that question realistically. And you're sitting out there touting things that even science is like, we don't know that, or we don't know how that would work or anything like that. So you're trying to answer questions that are currently probably unanswerable with our current frame of knowledge. And they're sitting there trying to say, well, this is what it is, and this is how it'll work. And I feel really weird because like I do tend to lean right. So like the fact that Trump is the president, like part of me is like, cool, like the right is in charge, but part of me is like, but I cannot stand behind this person.
Yeah.
And that kind of comes almost bringing it back circle with like those people that we were talking about earlier, where like every time you talk, my butthole puckers.
Yeah.
You know, it's like in a weird way, like, and I don't know if you agree with the person you're saying, but like sometimes, like with the person I was talking about, I'm like, you know, sometimes I do agree with the idea of what you're saying, but it's the way you are as a person that I just cannot get behind.
I don't know if it's necessarily with that person, but I know what you're talking about. I know where you're like, I get where you're coming from, but your delivery is just every which way wrong.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't make it worse.
Yeah.
But no, like with you talking about, you know, like Trump and the right, like I think that's the craziest shit to me. Is like you have the right mindset where like you like the ideas, you know, some of the ideas of the right predominantly, but you're aware enough to say that like I don't fucking like the dude that y'all put in charge.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's absolutely fucking fine. You know, you can still even attach your whole beliefs and ideas to a party. You don't have to like the person that's in charge of it. Like That's like if you worked at a shitty job and you had a terrible boss, but you were just like, nah, I fucking love that dude. Like he's so good. Yeah. But deep down you don't like. It's okay. It's okay to not agree with somebody on a personal level.
Right.
Like, it's totally fine. And I think
you know what's even crazier about that is, like, leftists who are like, oh, you support Trump, you're the devil. And I'm like, it's one of those things, too, where you're like, but because I support some of the things that he stands for does not mean I support Trump.
Yeah.
And how does that make me the devil? Because ultimately, like in my mind, what I'm thinking and what I believe in supporting the government, in my mind, I believe would actually be beneficial for the left as well.
Well, and that's the problem is we turn our politicians into these like rock star icons, and they become the party. They become the belief. You know, it's not like you're a Republican. It's you support Trump. Like, no, those are two completely fucking different things.
Completely different things. Like, and that boggles my mind too. Because the other thing is too, like, I definitely believe in a woman's right to choose 100%. In this Christianity movement to like appeal Roe versus Wade, I'm like, I cannot stand behind any of this.
No.
I've seen the problems it's caused and how you're putting women in jeopardy, like life-threatening jeopardy, because you believe that XYZ. But at the same time, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I don't necessarily believe the government should be a part of every single thing. I think you need to learn how to stand on your own feet. And I don't think that's a bad thing either, because I think that forces you to be a better person.
Yeah.
In general. But to say that I'm the devil because I believe in one thing or the other, when, you know, it's fluid. It's just like, and that's even crazier too, because the left wing believes in like gender fluidity. I'm like, well, what about political fluidity?
Yeah.
Like, what about the fact that I believe in some things on the right and some things on the left, and it's fluid to me?
Yeah, but see, that doesn't push.
It doesn't jive. It doesn't jive with anybody.
But that's such a. I've never heard that term before.
That's the heart of the problem with the leftists is like, well, I believe in gender fluidity, but like really, the argument I just proposed is like, okay, so you're all encompassing as long as it's only sexually based.
Yeah. Well, no, I've never heard that term before, but political fluidity. I really like that because that's
title of the podcast.
That's the truth of it. Is it really is, you know, you have the ability to examine politics from all angles, you as the citizen, as the person. And you can pick and choose
what you believe in.
Exactly what the fuck you like or you don't.
And that's what's crazy too, is like, you know, like, so, like in terms of like political government ideas, I fall on the right. But when you're talking about humanitarian ideas, I definitely fall on the left.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so to demonize me as like, well, I believe in smaller government. But to say like, oh well, you believe in smaller government, so you don't believe at all in gender equality or anything like that. That's bullshit. Like, no, I definitely believe in that. I don't have a problem with any of that. I'm speaking on a political platform of how I believe government should be run, and you're trying to convey the fact of like humanitarian rights to how I think government should be run, which are two completely different things.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think we have like, I don't think we realize how vast like the discussion around politics needs to be. Yeah. Because exactly what you're saying is like, if you're having a discussion about abortion, you don't need a reporter to stand up and start screaming about immigration. Yeah. You know, they're so vastly different that when you're like, what do you expect to be reported to you when the people asking questions are asking one person such a variant amount of shit? Like, right. You're going to say eventually some nonsense, or even just.
Well, here's the other thing too, and I'll be true to politicians. As much as we all kind of like to hate them, if I were to come to you with like a ridiculous off the wall question that you haven't been prepped on, you don't really truly know about, because let's be real, like politicians, like I know we want to think that they all like have a complete understanding of government and all of this stuff. And they don't. Like, they're there to serve a function of like proposing bills, voting on bills, representing the collective of whoever they represent. But the reality is like one person can't understand all of these things. That's why they have staffers. But to sit there and like you just randomly come up to a politician and you ask them like a got you question, and then you record that, and they're just like, they say something because they want to just say something. They need to respond to you, and you record it, and then you put it up on YouTube, and you're like, look at this dumb fuck who doesn't know. Like, yeah, of course. Like, if I just randomly came up to you and asked you a hardcore physics question, are you going to know the answer to it? Yeah. No, but are you going to try and say something? Probably.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, sometimes it is just that. It's just human error that is just plastered all over the news to like, oh, look at what they said. Look at this and that. Like, dude, you have to remember that at the end of the day, no matter what their position is, no matter how much power they hold, they are still people. Yeah. And you can trip up you can trip up the smartest motherfucker with the right question at the right time. Yeah. And then all of a sudden
they're the bad guy because they didn't know this one thing at this one particular time in the day.
Yeah. Like, yeah, and I guess I don't really look at it from that perspective of, I tend to hate politicians, but you're right. Like,
well, I definitely still do, because I do still think that there are some issues there, but to say that like, oh, you tripped someone up one time and then to call them out as like, oh, they're a horrible person because you tripped them up one time, like, that's not fair either. Yeah. Like, if you're on the left or the right, I don't care what side you're on. If you do that, if you intentionally do a got you question and then post that as like, this person's a dumb fuck, no, you're a bad person. Yeah. Period.
Like fucking, what is it? InfoWars. Yeah. I hate that shit. Journalism.
You know what's funny about that though? It's like, I've watched Alex Jones. But on Joe Rogan's show, and you hear him, you're like, what's funny is like, he's just an amped up dude, but I don't know if he's totally like, he just definitely believes in the out there beliefs, but at the same time too, you're like, he's kind of,
I think Alex,
rational, like his thoughts are linear. Yeah, I'll say that they're out there, but at least they're A B C D. They're not like A D Z K P Q R. You know what I mean?
Well, and I think Alex Jones, in his own platform, the way that he is edited and presented on InfoWars, makes him just unintentionally to a subjective viewer seem fucking crazy. But when you see him, like you said, because he's been on Joe Rogan a couple times now, And he's still a fucking nut house. But he's you see the
thought.
natural thought of why he's a nut house. You see exactly what you're saying. Like when he gets onto a thought, it sounds bad, but it's almost like he has Asperger's. Like that thought is it. You know,
like,
and that's
like what
that's
I said.
what you're
I feel like
about.
the difference between a crazy person and an eccentric person is an eccentric person goes A, B, C, D. And a crazy person goes A, B, Q, D, C, T, F, Y. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like they're just all over the place making these random connections. And as much as I don't believe necessarily what Alex Jones is saying, I can follow the logic.
Yeah, I can follow. I understand exactly what you're saying. And this is really important. You don't have to agree with someone at all to follow their logic.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing about logic is it's somewhat subjective. And you have to be able to like, and he's a prime example. He is labeled a crazy person because of, I mean, there's obviously so. He says crazy shit.
Yeah.
But no, I get it. Like you can totally follow Alex Jones's story. Like he could be talking about how, you know, the frogs are fucking in the rain and it's causing children to die in Africa. But I can follow that story.
Yeah, no, the facts may be skewed, but given the facts that he presents, you can understand how he went from A to B to C.
Okay, all right, yeah.
You know what's crazy too, though, is like I feel like both the left and the right, they can do that, and it's so frustrating to me where I see the left and the right, and I almost feel like it's me and Peaches, because you know what's funny is like. Me and Peaches, like when we get in a debate, we I would say like 90% of the time we legitimately agree on the same thing. I just like to be devil's advocate and poke holes in his own theories. Mm-hmm. But really, I think most of the time when I do that, I'm doing it to lead him to another train of thought that still supports his argument. But I feel like that's what's missing from the left and the right, because I do truly feel like if you're a true Christian and you're a true left person, those are basically the same thing.
Yeah.
If you really subscribe to what
if you were to envelop yourself in both of the ideals, the left would identify with Christianity and the right would identify more with the humanitarian, all-encompassing. So it's it's so weird. It's just, but it's, you know, and that's just what we do with everything. We pick and choose. Like,
well, I think it's like the left is like demonize the right as like being Nazis. and to be fair, there are some. To be fair. Oh, did I show you my favorite shirt?
No.
I bought it's a t-shirt. It has a big heart on it. It says Bonnie McMurray.
Nice.
I was like, fuck yeah.
Shout out Letterkenny. If you don't watch that show, watch it.
Watch it. I'm surprised.
After you're done with it.
Yeah, watch all of this first. Like, subscribe.
And share. Tell your friends about it. Tell your mom. Who knows?
Tell your dad.
Tell your uncle. Not the weird one.
Tell your niece. The one that's over 18.
Yeah, because no kid should ever listen to this conversation.
Yeah, 18 and below, no go.
No go.
That's just a rule for life. Like
you gotta have a permission slip, and even at that, we're throwing it out the door. 18, nope, no go.
Yeah, no, but it's. I don't even remember what we were talking about now.
I don't know. Oh, we were talking about. Well, we've been talking about the left and the right for a while, but about
they basically agree with it. Weirdly, like if you looked at really, their humanitarian elements, they would agree with each other. Yeah. Like the only difference with the right is like they just believe that like gays or whatever bad. But like if you really read the Bible, I know they're like to lay with another sex or whatever is bad, but if you read all of the other teachings, it basically says like, okay, that may be a sin to lay with the same sex, But you should still treat everybody as your neighbor.
Yes, and don't we forgive sins? You know, and I don't know. We were talking about that earlier, and I can't help but find so many similarities in what Christianity and what Christians get so bent out of shape about is almost always sexually based, and I find that just to be so bizarre.
Yeah,
like they care about gay marriage, abortion, birth control, like all. Why?
Yeah.
Why the fuck? Why is that? Like, why is that your cross to die on? Why is that the one that you chose?
The only reason I can understand the abortion thing is like, okay, I believe, I can understand the idea that like once someone has reached this certain
I get
maturity in the womb that okay, now they have a consciousness, and I can understand that. But to force people who have been in situations where they've been raped or the baby is no longer viable, but the baby still has to stay in the womb to the point where it's a harm to the parent.
The
mother, that seems it's just I don't have words for how ridiculous that is. Like, if there is not a viable child, but you are not legally allowed to take that child out to save the mother's life, and you have to put the mother in harm because it's not legal to take that child out, even though it is not a viable child anymore.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand to me it's like a control thing. Like what? And if you can control someone at a base level of something, as innate as sexuality.
What's crazy too is like they do this to people who are in a hard spot where they don't know where to turn or and so you're taking advantage of people who are in a place that they don't know, and you're pretending to have all the answers, but you're basically tricking them and lying to them.
Yeah, you're making it seem like you're there to help, but
you're not.
You're not. It's
if you were a true Christian, you would be there to help this person through what they need to go through. This individual person, what do they need?
Yeah.
Not what do I need them to need?
Well, and I think that this. I remember one time there was when I really like firsthand saw like the ignorance of this kind of protest, if you will. I think I was like 20 or something, and I went to Planned Parenthood for the first time to get checked for an STD because I had slept around.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea. If you're sleeping around, you should probably go get checked. And so, I didn't have any insurance at the time, and so I went to Planned Parenthood, and there was protesters outside screaming at me about like, you fucking baby killer and this and that.
Yeah,
and I'm
that's
like,
the crazy
and
thing
I'm like,
too,
dog, I'm here to make sure I don't have herpes. Like, what are you screaming about?
For whatever reason, they associate Planned Parenthood with abortions, and like that's only like
that's not even the whole thing.
Small segment of what Planned Parenthood does.
Yeah, a lot of it is here's free condoms and like
here's birth control for people who are underemployed or whatever, or like here's a
$40 STD test that
to make sure you're not passing shit on to people that that's life threatening, not life threatening, but like a life condition.
Well, sometimes
it could be life. Yeah, syphilis. Fuck that. God damn.
Yeah, but I mean, like, I just remember that like walking in there and being screamed at, and I was like, you fucking idiots.
Do you know the one off Austin Bluffs?
No, it was the one on Fillmore and...
Wait, maybe we should not tell exactly where they are.
It was somewhere in...
I definitely went to the one off Austin Bluffs, though.
Fillmore and Centennial. The protesters are still there, actually.
I believe that. They probably camp out. But that's just, like, to me, that's, like... It's crazy because they're basically fundamentally protesting your right to receive services.
Yeah. Like, and they talk, and that's
health
the crazy
services too.
Yeah, they
which
talk
is
about,
also like a thing that you would think that a Christian would want to promote.
But they were the people, the Christians specifically were the ones that were talking about defunding Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
Like,
do you realize
what?
how much other stuff, how much other good that they do?
Yeah.
I could, like, to me, I could understand the argument, like, okay, Planned Parenthood, no more abortions. And not that I would agree with it, but I can understand that.
You could understand that argument coming from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to be like, no, everything that Planned
Everything,
Parenthood
no
does,
more funding.
like, are you kidding me? You realize how much good Planned Parenthood actually does to the community?
Do people not understand, like, before things like Planned Parenthood and before we had knowledge of STDs, people used to die of syphilis a lot.
Yeah.
People would become what they call syphilitic morons,
Yeah,
and they would either kill themselves or die in mental institutions.
Yeah, it's
like,
not a fun
STDs
thing.
are not something to be fucked around with. Like, that's
Yeah.
the reason that stuff doesn't happen anymore is because we've learned from science and doctors and like these, like, we should do this now. And you have this crazy group of people that are like, fuck science, fuck doctors.
Well, you know what's crazy to me too is, like, I grew up with a family that's very Christian, and they're very loving, and they're great people, and I'm sure they're against abortion, but at the same time, I think they're 100% against, or they're 100% for, like, helping people.
Yeah,
like quality Christians. And I think what's really sad, is I think the left goes, you're a Christian, you're a horrible person. We're like, no, I know a lot of really good Christians and Catholics and like religious people where they're like, no, they're just legit. Seth is a perfect example. Seth is a great dude. He's never preached once to any of us.
No. And he understands that they are his beliefs, and that's the end of it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And I'm sure if we went up to Seth and we're like, hey, Seth, how do you feel about this? Can you teach me, tell me, whatever? Yeah. Seth would be like, yeah, no problem. Like, I'll tell you. And Seth is the perfect example of a proper Christian, I believe.
Absolutely.
You have yet to meet Seth. We really hope he comes back from Africa soon.
He will be a wonderful, well, not even an addition to this podcast, but a return to this podcast because we've missed his sweet, sweet face.
Yeah, but I'm going to say this. If you're a Christian out there and you have fault with anything that we're saying, I think when you meet Seth and you see how Seth interacts with us, I think the way Seth interacts with us is exactly how a proper Christian should. Yeah, because it's not, and that's the thing, is it's not like Seth interacts with us like we are outside of his group. You know what I mean? Like, and we don't interact with him like he's outside of our group. He's outside of our group. We have conversation together, and we are able to do so in a way where we don't. There's not even an instance where I think like, oh, I might say this and step on Seth's toes, and I hope that he doesn't feel that way at all, because our conversations, whether they're religious, like especially when they're religiously based. I've had some of the best conversations about Christianity with Seth that I've probably had with anybody, because he is so open-minded and so willing to talk about why he believes. Yeah, and not judge, and not even trying to bring it upon you. And I think that's where the understanding is I'm not trying to convey him to my view, and he's not trying to convey me to his. We are just talking. Yeah. And when you do that, you fucking learn. Right. Yeah, no, I honestly, again, I don't know if Seth even gets to watch these because he's in Africa right now, but hi, Seth. We miss you. We can't wait till you're back on the podcast. Good luck with all your Africa stuff. Hope you don't get eaten by a lion, because that would really suck. If you got eaten by a lion, I'd be very sad, but you would have died a valiant death. For sure, especially, and I would definitely tell people that like you put up a fight for 2 minutes for the shot. Not believable. You know what? A minute is believable. No, you put up a fight for a minute. You fought. So hard. I know Seth. So if Seth got attacked by like a lion or something, he would be like, camera angle, like, dude,
You think
fighting my leg, like.
Yo, you think he would document the whole?
Yeah, no, I think
Ooh.
if Seth was getting attacked by a wild animal and he knew he was gonna die, he would just be like, document this.
Now, Seth, if you did that, I don't want you to get eaten by a lion, but I would also love to like publish those photos because that'd be so cool.
Don't get eaten.
Don't
by
get
a lion.
eaten though.
But we understand your vigor and commitment to your craft.
Maybe go hang out with a giraffe.
They're fucktards too.
Are they really?
Yeah, dude, they'll fucking whip you with their necks. Like that's how they fight. Yeah,
Dude,
well,
could
like,
you imagine getting smacked with a full giraffe neck?
Have you
like,
ever not seen male giraffes like fight?
No, I've seen them like do their thing,
Yeah,
but I'm saying like you as a person, you're just on the ground and a giraffe's like crammed, dude.
Yeah,
you're gonna get
you're fucked. You are fucked. Ah.
Fucking giraffes, dude.
God damn it,
What
Seth. Now I'm worried about you.
Yeah, Seth's out there.
Sorry about the rest of the audience. We're just worried about our fellow co-host right now.
Really, we don't.
Imagining all the bad. I feel like a parent right now. We're just imagining all the bad shit that could possibly happen.
This is what happens when you let your kid go on a trip for the first time.
Yeah.
And you're just like, oh God, like, is he getting eaten by a lion? Is he getting neck whipped by a giraffe? Like,
right.
Has he stumbled into the hippos yet? Like,
God
I don't
damn,
know.
We don't know.
I don't even know what part of Africa
we
he's
can't
at,
even
or if
call
any of
him
these,
right now.
or if any of these animals are even applicable to anywhere close to where he's at.
Seth, be safe. We hope to see you soon.
And next time we're getting you a radio, we're going to get a SATCOM, dude. We're going to make sure that we're going to set up a little mobile command station over here. We're going to make sure we can reach out, get calm with you, make sure you're not getting neck whipped or, wherever your next mission is, who knows?
Yeah, no, there's plenty of like quality video to come out of Seth. He's sprouting into his own, and we don't want that to just fall apart.
Yeah, I mean, he might come back with some of the most beautiful footage we've ever seen.
Could be. Hopefully. I mean, that's what's getting paid for, so. Well, shit, like, again, Seth, please don't die. We
keep having to reiterate that, but that's because I don't know what conditions you're living in, man. So, just be safe. He could be living it up. We don't know.
I think he is. Like, legitimately, I talked to him. Like, I think he's having the fucking time of his life, dude.
Good.
So to get back to the left and the right, like, do we even need to go back to the left and the right?
No,
like,
I think it's a very reciprocal, or it's a
circular
argument. We're just gonna keep. It's kind of like what you were talking about, you and CJ. I think you and CJ, Peaches.
Whatever. He doesn't.
Yeah.
His name is Peaches.
You guys,
because he eats lots of peaches.
He wants to go to the country and eat a lot of peaches.
Moving to the country, gotta eat a lot of peaches.
I remember one time I watched an interview with the president of the United States, and they were like, "What's the meaning to the song Peaches?" And the dude was like, "Man, I wish." He's like, "I wish it had an artistic reason." He's like, "But really?" He's like, I was just in a place in my life where I wanted to move back to the South and eat peaches. And they were like, oh, okay. And he was like, that's it. That's the whole song.
Yeah, not all artistic inspiration is deep.
And sometimes it's just that. But no, what I was saying is you and Peaches, you guys argue in a circular format like you were talking about. I think because you both play the devil's advocate sometimes. Well, and I think that sometimes it gets lost, and you're both, dude, because I've seen it happen.
The same thing.
And I'm just like, goodness gracious.
No, I've kind of learned that where I'm like, it used to be way worse, but in the last podcast, like when he said something, I'm like, oh shit, like you just said something in a biological perspective. Like, okay, cool. Like, that's it. We don't need to keep doing this. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because like, I know we can argue. Because I think, what I think Peach has learned is, because I used to always be devil's advocate with him, and like I agreed with probably 90% of what he said, but I would argue the opposite side just for fun and intellectual whatever. And I think he realized that, so I think he like kind of tried to turn it on me, and I'm like, no, I see what you're doing. Like, no, we're arguing the same point. Let's just call that.
Yeah.
We're done. We don't need to do it anymore.
It is funny when I've been in some very, very heated arguments in my life where like you're even trying to tell the person that you're arguing with, you're like, we are saying the same fucking thing. And they're like, but the argument has gone so far off the rails at that point that they're like, fuck you for agreeing with me. Like,
that was me and Amber with the darts, where I'm like, it doesn't make any sense to have all the darts count unless you can physically measure them. And if you don't have a measurement tool, then it should just be the closest to the bullseye wins. And you guys were closer to the bullseye, so you won. We play league rules. Well, you guys, I already admitted that you won, so there's no point to this conversation.
Why are we still yelling? Oh man, no, I don't know. That's the funny thing about arguments too, is like, I don't think you can ever. I think like a really, really like a formally structured debate is the only time you could ever have like a cohesive argument, because other than that, as soon as the slightest shred of emotion gets involved, you are absolutely off the rails.
I think you can have those types of conversations as long as it's with someone who is able to listen, but also understand what you're saying. And then you can have someone who can, reply in their way. But I think the problem is like when you have people who are like, I'm dead set in my way. And so basically I'm going to listen to what you say, but as soon as you're done talking, I'm just going to let you have it with my beliefs.
Yeah.
And so there's no real conversational debate there. It's just like, yeah, I heard what you said, but I don't really care. I'm just going to say what I feel and think, and that's it, and period. .com.
I do think that I do think that happens a lot, where I think a lot, and I catch myself doing this, so I say people in general, but I think we listen with a bias. Like, a lot of times, like when you start arguing with someone, like you're listening and you are understanding you're understanding what they're saying, but you're already, instead of fully like enveloping yourself in what they're saying, you're just like, nope, that's wrong, this is right, okay, like, okay.
Yeah,
and you're dissecting
like check points.
You're making your next talking point off of what they're saying instead of
listening. And even trying to understand too, because there's like, there's stuff that you may not agree with, but they'll say it, and you're like, well, I would say probably 99% of us do not sit there and go, well, I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
Like, especially in the heat of the moment.
No, yeah. That's what I'm saying. If you're already emotionally invested into it, the chances of you going, oh yeah, that's a valid, you're correct, that shit's out the fucking window. Like,
well, the worst part too is where like you get in one of those arguments and you do, maybe 90% go like, okay, I can understand where you're coming from. So like I can understand A, B, C, D, but I still disagree with you on E. But then you go, well, I disagree with on E, and they're like, no, you're not understanding, you're not listening. Like,
yeah. Like,
no, like I just
understanding.
Admitted to you that I understand most of what you're saying. I just disagree on this one point.
And it's not that's the thing. Understanding and disagreeing are not different, or right. They are different. Like, I understand what you're saying. I disagree with it.
Yeah.
Like,
period. That's it. That's
yeah. And like
unless this is like except for like basic level math. That's an acceptable response.
Yeah. You know, like, yeah, exactly. Like, there are certain things that are infallible. Like, 2 + 2 = 4. That is it. You can't theorize anything to me that would make me believe otherwise.
Yeah. Those conversations,
that's when you're just like, good day, thank you, yes, that's true. But you can absolutely understand that, if you're even talking still in mathematical terms, that like you can understand how an equation got to the point it got to.
Yeah.
But
It's
you-
almost easier because
Yeah.
it is literally laid out before you. And so, like,
But you don't necessarily have to like how you got there.
right. And I honestly feel like I've experienced this in my life because and I've said this multiple times to other people where my brain does not think linearly. It doesn't go A, B, C, D. It goes A, X, Q, B, which probably I'm kind of crazy, but in a weird way because it does it all at once. So you tell me one thing and my brain goes do, like all over the place, and I can see how everything interacts with each other. My biggest problem has always been like conveying that to people because language is linear. So you can't just you can't express how your brain works when your brain doesn't work linearly, but language does.
That's actually something I had when you think, do you have an internal monologue or do you think visually? Because I read something about
way
this.
to say this? Like, so I call it a spider web. I really do. Like, I've talked.
No
about
shit, you're one. Oh my god.
Oh, so like I'll map this out for you. Sorry, viewers, you're not gonna be able to see this, but like thought A, right? So here's the main thing that you tell me, right? Immediately my brain goes to this.
5 hours later.
That's how my brain thinks. So you tell me A, and all of this happens instantaneously. Probably have to hold it really close to that camera. It's a wide angle lens.
Oh my god. There you go. So
yeah, that's why I call it spider web.
Well, so no, what I had read is that for me, I do not think like that. I have essentially I have like a 24/7 like internal monologue that goes on in my head, and it deciphers each thought as if it was me talking in my head, I suppose. And what the thing I had read, and I actually put this on the Second String Debate Team's page. It's a really interesting read. But
where do you find that at?
That would be on Facebook and Instagram. I will share the links as well.
There you go.
But what it had talked about is that a thought pattern like mine, where you have the internal monologue and everything is deciphered, is the most common. Mm-hmm. And I did not know, and from reading this article, most people do not know that other people think like you, where it is not necessarily like a linear driven or even like a monologue driven. It's like you think in images and almost in like yours for a spider web, for example. Or like some people have, instead of the monologue, they will have like abstract images that are in their mind, and that is formulated into what they say. And that shit's just fucking crazy. Like, if you were to say something to me, like the way I think, especially in conversation, is like you say something to me and that particular point will strike a response. Yeah. And that response is what I now have to like keep in the forefront of my mind. That's the only thing I focus on until it's my turn to speak again.
Yeah.
Like well, not the only thing I'm focused on. Like I'm still listening, but I'm what I'm doing from there is I'm like now calculating my response to make sure that it makes sense to what you've said. So I guess that's kind of similar in that way. Like I'm making sure that what is going to come out of my mouth is applicable to the conversation, and I'm not just like, bah, just
right.
like word.
But I think the hard part for me is like when that happens, I do like it becomes word vomit. It's that.
It is truly a weird experience to be a man. Like, because everything's dope until whenever the fuck your body decides to hit puberty, and then you're just like
pussy to
it's like just the most like oversexed creature on the entire world, just like
Again, this comes back to me drinking Jameson downtown with Micah. I will not explain why that's a relevant commentary, but it is, believe me.
Men are weird creatures, man. They are not. Well, and you had just said before we turned the camera on, like when you as a man try to explain to a woman why you do some things, like some behavior, some whatever it is.
I will give you a perfect example, and you elaborate on this. This is one thing that I think across the board, most women do not understand. Men, when we feel emotions, we don't always know how to process them or even know what we're thinking. So what we do is we reclude, and we just we go into our own little cave to process that information. And then when we're ready, we will come out of that cave and they'll let you know exactly what we're thinking. And the problem, I think, is a lot of women are like, oh, he's recluding, he doesn't want any part of me. And what they're actually doing is we're trying to figure shit out so we can express it.
Yeah, I think that is if you were to put it down, one of the hardest things to explain as a man is when you, and I don't even know if you can say as a man, but for me, when an emotion is there that is prevalent and that I need to process, I can't tell you right away.
Yeah.
Because if I was to just say what came to my mind, it would just be blank. And that's why that exists.
It wouldn't be accurate either.
And I think that women operate differently in that way. Sometimes is and it's weird. They understand their emotions almost immediately.
Yeah.
They're I feel this way, and here it is. And sometimes as a man, you're I don't, what? No, hold on. I need 15 minutes. I don't get it. What are you saying right now?
Yeah. But weirdly, I think women take that as a diss to them or
no,
disrespectful to them.
It's not. It's just
it's not that. It's
we're not as smart.
We're just trying to process this emotional information. We will get back to you, but you need to give us a second to figure it out.
You need to
and
leave
the more you go
what
are you thinking? What are you thinking? What are you thinking? While you're trying to figure it out,
you're I don't know.
That's when guys snap. That's where we're shut up, leave us alone. And then you're he's such a dick. No, you just needed to give us a second to process something. We will come back to you and explain what we're feeling.
And that's that opens up a whole nother door. How do women process emotions so much faster? Or do they?
Yeah.
How do they gain such an understanding? Because the way I look at it is if they're gaining an understanding of their own emotion to a level where they're ready to speak about it, I feel they understand it. Because I'm not going to speak about anything emotionally until I feel like I have a grasp on it. And if that can happen for them, it's in a moment's notice. Well, goddamn.
I think that. And I'm not trying to be sexist here, but I think it comes down to men typically are problem solvers. That's the whole idea behind mansplaining or whatever. So when we see, I think the difference is yes, they have that ability to process their emotions. We've devoted part of our brain to when we see a problem, we just instantly go, this is how we fix it. How do we fix it? This is what we're going to do, blah, 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 blah. And so it's a different, we've just allocated our thought patterns to different areas, because I guarantee you, my first thought when our dryer was fucking scratching was, I'm gonna pull that thing out of the wall and fucking unbolt everything in the back and see what the fuck's going on with it, because that thing is annoying as fuck.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? We're more problem solvers, so that's where our brain goes initially.
Well, yeah, and I guess it's two different ways of analyzing the same problem. You know, it's or not even a problem, but just a thought.
Yeah.
You analyze thoughts different. You're right. I think that, it's, and, I'll just say it, it's naturally inclined to men to be the problem solver, to be the that's your role.
And I think that's a lot of reasons why there's a disconnect in relationships sometimes, because a girl just wants to oh, this is just what I'm going through. And all she wants to do is just tell you about it. But as guys, we're oh, you have a problem? Let me fix it. And we're telling them how to fix it. And they're no, that's not what I wanted. I just wanted you to hear me. and understand what I'm going through. And we're like, I don't understand. If you're telling me there's a problem, then why can't I try and fix it?
And that's what I think, like, when women say, like, you're not listening, I think that's really it. Like, and it is a disciplined practice to actually sit there and I will agree with you. As a man, it is one of the most frustrating things in the world to hear someone tell you their problems and you not necessarily be able to share a solution, but to not think of a solution.
Yeah.
To keep your mind in a state where you're not trying to fix it, you're just trying to hear.
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing.
I think a lot of guys can like understand that. Like, that is very difficult for us because when we hear a problem, we're just like, XYZ beat that you're done.
You should have already solved. Like, let's solve it right now.
Why is this even still a problem for you? I would have figured this out a week
Let's
ago.
do it now. Let's solve it right now. I don't give a shit. Like,
yeah. But I think that is like that's difficult, and I think that largely that's where there's a huge disconnect in relationships right now, just in general. Because yes, women are being treated equal. We want to treat them equal. Men are still very protective, just biologically. We process things differently. We want to be cohesive with each other, and it is very difficult for both of us to like loosen up our biological predispositions to things and like come together and like realize like, oh, we don't think the same. Like, even if we have the same beliefs, we don't think the same. We are inherently different. And, and that's what you have to try. And I guess that's the goal of any relationship, is to find, like, somebody that your thought process doesn't offend. I almost feel like it's like you need to find someone who your thought process does not offend them,
and that they can also, that both of you can empathize with the other's thought process. You can think, because that's a big thing too. It's like what we're talking about when you need that moment to emotionally rationalize something. A lot of times that's silence. And you have, if that's the kind of person you are, then you have to find a partner that's okay with you being silent for a little while. And that's.
But I also think, like, to some extent, society has put this pressure on women where they're like, well, every man should be able to talk, because there's like a feminist movement, and guys are like, well, I need to be able to relate to my women, so it's always talking. And I'm like, yeah, you can talk, but I think sometimes maybe you're just saying shit out your ass and you really don't know what it is.
Wouldn't you rather have effective conversation than just conversation? Like, if somebody's not ready to talk about something, then if you make them talk about it, I can almost guarantee you're never.
It's just like interrogation. Like, are you going to get an accurate answer? No. But if you let them come to you, which I would say in most relationships with a guy, if a guy is with a girl and they're talking to them, they're spending their time with them, like, that guy's committed to you. I would say 90% of the time. Like, guys are actually weirdly more loyal than women are, just statistically. So, like, if a guy's not talking to you, it's not because he doesn't like you. It's because he's trying to figure out what the fuck to say to you in a way that makes sense to him.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing, is like, at least for me, is I tend to overthink my responses because I want them to be received in the right way.
Right.
And a lot of times, like I said before, that comes through silence. Like, I'm really trying to think, like,
how to make this,
how to justify this moment, like how to really make something out of this. And sometimes you drop something heavy on someone, and it's radio silence for a little bit.
Yeah, but I think that's just what it is, and that's what relationships are. And I think we've kind of come to an end of this rambling over a cactus.
We appreciate you listening to us rambling over a cactus.
Yeah, we've gone on weird detour, but that's kind of the point of rambling over Cactus. We don't
Started out with Jojo Rabbit and the Nazis, and now we're here to relationships. So
yeah.
you're welcome for the journey.
Yeah. Well, we hope to see you next time on Rambling Over a Cactus. Hopefully next time it won't be in my bedroom.
Have a good one.
Night.